and how it all led him to that bus.
Right. What was that journey really about? Self.
Let's try and figure this out. Why would a really bright kid, from a well-off family, just throw away $24,000, ditch his car, burn his cash, and then just walk into the Alaskan wilderness with barely anything, a cheap rifle and 10 pounds of rice? Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're getting into the story of Christopher Johnson McCandless, or as he called himself, Alexander Supertramp. It's a puzzle.
It really is, and it's a story that just sticks around, doesn't it, even after all this time. When they found his body, September 1992, in that old abandoned bus near Denali, bus 142, the news just raised so many questions.
Right, like how does this happen? You've got this high-achieving guy from Annandale, Virginia, just graduated Emory, and somehow he engineers his own disappearance and ultimately his death.
Yeah, and that initial mystery is exactly what pulled Jon Krakauer into it, the author who wrote Into the Wild. He admitted he got kind of obsessed, actually, because it wasn't just some kid getting lost.
No, it felt bigger.
Exactly. It touches on these really big themes like the pull of the wild, and why young men especially are drawn to high-risk stuff. And maybe underlying it all, that really complicated relationship between fathers and sons.
Absolutely. So our goal today really is to go beyond just the adventure story. We want to dig into the sources, try to understand why he did it, what was driving him.
He wasn't just looking for thrills. The sources talk about this idea of Tolstoyan renunciation. He seemed to be actively seeking out hardship, danger, self-reliance, almost like a spiritual mission.
So we need to look at what that meant for him, practically speaking.
Right.
And how it all led him to that bus.
Right. What was that journey really about?
Okay, so part one, the renunciation. To get why he broke away so radically, we have to look at the life he was leaving. Annandale, Virginia. Pretty affluent background.
Yeah, textbook middle-class success on the surface. He was smart, did really well in school, competitive. He was a gifted athlete, too, a distance runner.
And the running seems important, doesn't it?
Yeah.
More than just sport.
Oh, definitely. It wasn't just physical for him. He talked about it like a moral thing, a spiritual exercise. He'd push himself. Imagine running against this evil wall, he called it, representing all the compromise and hypocrisy he saw in the world.
So even then, this idea of purity through hardship.
Exactly. Physical effort, denying himself comfort.
Yeah.
That was how he felt he could stay morally pure. Asceticism, basically.
And he was reading a lot of philosophy.
Right.
Which maybe didn't quite fit with his surroundings.
Right. Big influences mentioned are people like Thoreau, Jack London, but especially Leo Tolstoy, the Russian novelist who, famously gave up his wealth, tried to live like a peasant.
That idea really grabbed McCandless.
It became his standard, this Tolstoyan renunciation. It wasn't just about not liking money. It was like a command. You had to live simply, without luxury, to be true.
And that clash between his inner ideals and his outer life. It finally boiled over.
May 1990. Right after he graduated from Emory with a good GPA, mind you, he makes his first huge move, that $24,000 college fund his parents had saved. He gave every single penny to Oxfam America, the charity that fights hunger.
Wow. Okay, that's a statement. That money was probably meant for law school or something.
Oh, absolutely. It was a total rejection of the path they saw for him. And the way he told them was almost weirdly casual. I just mentioned he thought he'd disappear for a while.
Disappear for a while, and then he started actually doing it, shedding the old identity.
Yeah, piece by piece, it became almost ritualistic, like the Datsun incident, that's a big one, October 1990.
What happened there?
He's driving through Lake Mead National Recreation Area, this old yellow Datsun he had. Flash flood hits, engine gets wet, battery dies.
Okay, annoying, but fixable.
Totally fixable. Park rangers apparently got it started later pretty easily. But McCandless didn't see it as a problem to solve. He saw it as freedom.
From the car.
From possessions, from being tied down. So he took some essentials, stripped the Virginia license plates off, buried his rifle, and the big gesture.
Running the money.
Yep. Pulled out his wallet, took out the cash, about $123, and just burned it. Ashes.
It's such a dramatic image. Very symbolic.
It is, and maybe a bit naive, burning $100 to reject capitalism. But it shows how committed he was to being totally free, unburdened. That's when he started calling himself Alex, which later became Alexander Supertramp.
Master traveler. And this all ties back to his reading, like Thoreau.
Directly. In his copy of Walden, he marked up that famous line, "Rather than love, than money, than fame, give me truth." And right next to it, he just wrote, "Truth." in big block letters.
That was the quest.
That was it. He wanted to be, and this is a quote the sources use, emancipated from the stifling world of his parents and peers, a world of abstraction and security and material excess. That was his North Star.
Okay, so part 2. The network of the road. He's cut ties, burned the cash, got a new name. He's out there. But he wasn't totally alone, was he?
No, that's the fascinating part. For almost 2 years, he's wandering, trying to live this solitary ideal, but he keeps forming these really intense, though temporary, connections with people. He needed solitude, but he also seemed to rely on human kindness.
That's the paradox you mentioned. He's pushing people away, but also drawing them in.
Exactly. He was charismatic. People liked him. The first big example is Carthage, South Dakota. He lands there in the fall of 1990. Meets Wayne Westerberg.
The grain elevator guy.
Right. Westerberg gives him a job, lets him stay. McCandless is just Alex there, although Westerberg did make him fill out a tax form, so his real name, Chris, popped up.
And he liked Carthage.
Seemed to. Krakauer talks about its plebeian virtues, the honesty, the hard work, the simple life, everything he felt was missing back east.
It's interesting, though, this anti-materialist guy.
Mm-hmm.
His mom apparently said he was a natural-born capitalist, good at making money when he wanted to.
Yeah, he had this knack. Sold software, citing he could work hard and earn when he needed it, but only for a specific purpose, like funding the next leg of his journey, like getting that grub stake for Alaska.
His connection with Westerberg seemed pretty real, though.
It did. When he left Carthage, he gave Westerberg his copy of Tolstoy's War and Peace, a 1942 edition, and he wrote inside, "Listen to Pierre."
Pierre, the character searching for meaning.
Right, the one who chooses a simpler, more altruistic life in the end. McCandless even had mail sent to Westerberg's place, told people South Dakota was his home base.
But still, these connections had limits, especially if they got too close, too permanent.
That's where you see the pattern, particularly with older people who tried to mentor or help him more deeply, like Jan Burrs and her boyfriend Bob.
The rubber tramps.
Yeah, they traveled around selling stuff at flea markets. They took him under their wing for a bit, said he was always hungry, but seemed really happy. They kept trying to give him better gear for Alaska, warmer clothes, stuff like that.
And he refused.
Politely, but yeah. Firmly, taking gear would compromise the whole self-sufficiency thing.
And then there was Ronald France. That story is tough.
Yeah, it really is. Franz was an 80-year-old man in California, Salton City, lost his wife and son years before. He got incredibly attached to Alex, taught him leatherworking.
And he has to adopt him.
Yeah, straight up asked if he could legally adopt him as his grandson. Heartbreaking, really.
How did Alex react?
The sources say he was just deeply uncomfortable with the request. He couldn't handle that level of emotional commitment.
So he deflected.
Big time.
Yeah.
He wrote Franz this long philosophical letter, basically saying joy isn't mainly about human relationships, it's everywhere, in nature, from God. He told Franz he should get out, live unconventionally, sell his stuff, and hit the road.
Which, maybe good advice on some level, but also
a way to push him away. The source material notes that McCandless felt relieved that he had again evaded the impending threat of human intimacy. It was too much. He couldn't square that need for absolute freedom with, emotional ties.
And you think this all loops back to his family?
It seems central. He apparently obsessed over his father, Walt, and what he called his moral shortcomings.
This was about his father having a second family.
Yeah, the discovery that Walt had been living a double life for a while. He was still involved with his first wife, Marcia, and had another child with her after Chris was born to Billy, his second wife.
That must have been shattering for a kid focused on truth and hypocrisy.
Completely. He saw his parents' whole life, their success, their comfortable world, as built on this lie. His reaction wasn't just disappointment, it was absolute rejection.
He told his sister, Caroline, didn't he? Something pretty extreme.
Yeah, he apparently exploded at one point, saying their parents' behavior was so irrational, so oppressive, disrespectful, and insulting that I finally passed my breaking point.
And he decided to cut them off entirely.
His words were something like, he was going to divorce them as my parents once and for all and never speak to either of those idiots again as long as I live.
Wow.
So Alaska wasn't just about finding nature or truth. It was about escaping them, finding a place so pure, so remote that their perceived deception couldn't reach him anymore. The wilderness was going to be his clean slate.
Okay, part 3. The Alaska Odyssey, the final act. He's got this intense motivation now, this need to sever ties completely.
Right. So he heads back to Carthage one last time, spring of '92, works for Westerberg again, earns that final grub stake.
And still refusing help. better gear.
Absolutely. People offered advice, better equipment, even a quicker flight up north. He turned it all down. He had his plan. Left Carthage April 15th, heading for Alaska.
His final ride into the wild. That was with Jim Gallion.
Yeah, April 28th, 1992. Gallion, an electrician, picks him up near Fairbanks, and Gallion was worried right away.
Because Alex looked unprepared.
Totally. Gallion described his pack as improbably light, maybe 25–30 pounds max, for months in the Alaskan bush. Plus, his boots were cheap, not insulated. He had a .22 rifle, which is way too small for big game or serious defense. No axe, no compass, no proper map.
Gallion tried to warn him, give him stuff.
He did. Offered him better boots, tried to talk him out of it, or at least into getting better gear, but Alex was resolute. Gallion said he wouldn't give an inch. He just wanted to prove he could do it his way.
So Gallion dropped him off the Stampede Trail.
Yep. It's this old, overgrown mining road. Runs about 40 miles into the wilderness off the George Parks Highway north of Denali. It gets rough fast, prone to flooding, very isolated.
And Alex just walked in and found the bus.
Pretty quickly, yeah. May 1st, he stumbles on this old Fairbanks City Transit bus, number 142. Left there years ago by a road crew. Had a bunk, a stove barrel. He called it Magic Bus Day in his journal. That became his base camp.
And he actually survived out there for a while.
He did, for over 3 months, which is impressive given how little he had. He was smart, resourceful in some ways, hunted squirrels, grouse, porcupines maybe, foraged berries, edible plants, supplemented that small bag of rice.
But then came the moose, June 9th.
Right. His biggest success, but also his biggest failure, he managed to shoot this large moose, huge animal, maybe 600–700 pounds. He was thrilled, took photos, wrote about it like a major triumph.
But then the reality of dealing with that much meat set in.
Exactly. He had no real idea how to preserve it properly in Alaskan conditions. He tried smoking it based on some advice he'd gotten back in South Dakota, but it was June. Too warm, too humid.
Didn't work.
Total disaster. The meat spoiled almost immediately. Maggots got into it, the smell. He had to just abandon the whole carcass. A huge waste. And for someone focused on efficiency and living off the land, that was devastating.
He wrote about it, didn't he? How bad he felt.
Yeah, his journal entry is really telling. I now wish I had never shot the moose. One of the greatest tragedies of my life. It hit him hard.
And it pushed him even further into his philosophical ideas.
It seems like it. Shortly after, he's reading Thoreau again, Walden. He highlights a passage about how catching and eating fish felt insignificant and unnecessary and cost more than it came to. And right next to it, he wrote, the moose. Like proof that meat wasn't the answer.
Okay, so fast forward about 2 months, July 3rd, he decides he's done. He's ready to leave.
Yeah, he felt he'd done it, survived the summer, found whatever truth he was looking for. He packs up, heads back towards the road, and that's when he hits the fatal obstacle. The one he didn't anticipate.
The Teklinica River.
The Teklinica. When he crossed it going in back in April, it was fine. Just a shallow stream, maybe knee-deep, easy wade.
But not in July.
Totally different river. Summer melt from the glaciers, plus rain. It had turned into this raging torrent, maybe 100 feet wide, freezing cold, incredibly powerful, way too dangerous to cross.
A classic Alaskan hazard.
Right.
Rivers change dramatically with the seasons.
Textbook. And he didn't have a good map, so he didn't know the terrain well enough. He walked the bank for days, looking for a way across, realized he was completely cut off, river on one side, wilderness on the other.
And the terrible irony, there was a way across nearby, wasn't there, if he'd known?
Agonizingly close. Just a mile or so upstream, there was an old gauging station the Park Service used to use. And across the gorge there, they'd strung a thick steel cable.
For what?
For pulling a little aluminum basket like a tiny cable car across the river to check the water levels.
Oh, a bridge, basically.
A potential bridge. But here's the cruel twist. The basket itself was apparently secured on the other side of the river, the side he couldn't get to without a dangerous swim or wade first.
So close, yet so far. If he just had a map, or maybe wasn't so set against any kind of infrastructure.
It might have saved him, but he didn't know or couldn't reach it. So he turned back, retreated to the bus, probably hoping the river would go down later in August, but it didn't. Not enough.
Right. Let's move into part 4. The parallels and figuring out what actually happened to him. His story feels unique, but he wasn't the only one drawn to this kind of extreme path, was he?
No, definitely not. And the sources do a good job placing him in that context, comparing him to other wilderness seekers. It helps understand him better, like Everett Ruiz.
Young artist in the 30s, Nemo.
Yeah, vanished in Utah, 1934, only 20. Left that carving Nemo, 1934 Nemo, meaning nobody in Latin. Ruiz was a pure romantic, escaping civilization for beauty and solitude. McCandless definitely had some of that spirit.
But then there are others, quite different. Gene Rosellini.
Rosellini's case is fascinating. Highly intelligent guy. He spent a whole decade trying to live exactly like a Stone Age person, a serious anthropological experiment. He actually managed it, survived for 10 years.
But what was his conclusion?
He basically decided it was impossible for modern humans to truly live that way long term. The effort was too immense. He came back to civilization and then, sadly, took his own life in 1991. He was more of an empiricist, testing a theory. McCandless was driven by ideals.
And there are others who just made fatal mistakes, right?
Yeah.
Like John Waterman or Carl McCunn.
Right. Waterman was a brilliant climber, but very unstable mentally, disappeared on Denali.
Yeah.
And McCunn, that's just tragic incompetence. He flew into the Brooks Range for photography, but completely forgot to arrange his flight out. He even waved at a plane thinking it was just checking on him, gave the okay signal, not realizing it meant no help needed. Starved waiting for a pickup that was never scheduled.
So how was McCandless different from them?
Well, he wasn't suicidal like Rosellini seems to have become. He wasn't clearly mentally ill like Waterman. And he wasn't just careless about logistics like McCunn. I mean, he planned his entry, just not the exit under summer conditions. He was definitely rash and dangerously unprepared for Alaska specifically. But he survived 113 days. He had a system, a purpose, however flawed. He was more like a pilgrim, driven by this intense philosophy.
And that philosophy.
But he survived 113 days. He had a system, a purpose, however flawed. He was more like a pilgrim, driven by this intense philosophy.
And that philosophy seemed to shift right at the end, inside the bus.
That's one of the most poignant parts. Late July, trapped, getting weaker. He's reading Dr. Zhivago, Pasternak's novel, and there's a passage about how life, happiness, it's only real when it's shared with others.
And McCandless wrote something next to it.
Yeah, just this simple, devastating note. Happiness only real when shared.
Wow. So after all that pushing away, all the solitude, he realized he needed connection after all.
It seems like a huge realization coming right as his body was starting to fail him completely.
Which brings us to how he died. Because the initial story wasn't quite right, was it? About confusing plants.
No, that was the first theory Krakauer reported, that he mistook edible wild potato, Hedysarum alpinum, for a toxic look-alike wild sweet pea, H. Mackenzie. But that seems unlikely now.
So what's the current understanding?
The revised theory, based on more research and testing Krakauer pursued later, is more specific and, frankly, more tragic. McCandless had been eating the roots of the correct plant, the wild potato H. alpinum, safely for weeks.
Okay, so what went wrong?
The problem seems to have been the seeds, or the seed pods. Later in the summer, maybe the roots got too tough, too hard to dig or eat. So he started eating the seeds of that same supposedly safe plant.
And the seeds are poisonous.
Not exactly poisonous in the way we usually think, like instantly lethal, but they likely contained an alkaloid, something chemically similar to swainsonine. And this specific type of alkaloid acts as an anti-metabolite, especially in someone already starving.
An anti-metabolite, what does that mean?
It means it interferes with your body's ability to process nutrients. Even though he was eating something, the alkaloid was blocking his system from converting his own stored fats and proteins into usable energy, into glucose.
So his body couldn't access its own fuel reserve.
Exactly. It essentially shut down his metabolism at a critical point. He was starving, and this compound made it impossible for his body to fight back, even with the minimal calories he might have been getting from the seeds or berries. It induced paralysis and extreme weakness by preventing energy utilization.
That explains his journal entry near the end, July 30th.
Right. Extremely weak. Fault of pot. Seed. Starving. Great jeopardy. He knew something was terribly wrong, and he connected it to the seeds.
So it wasn't just ignorance, it was this specific, cruel biochemical trap.
It seems so. An innocent mistake, eating part of a plant he thought was safe, but having a devastating effect because he was already so malnourished. That weakness made it impossible to hunt, gather more food, or even attempt to hike out again.
God, that's rough. And his final days.
Heartbreaking. The last written entry is August 12th. Beautiful blueberries, just observing nature, even then. After that, just dates, tally marks, counting the days. He left that SOS note taped to the bus door.
SOS, I need your help. I am injured, near death.
Yeah, and too weak to hike out of here. Signed, Chris McCandless. Then, sometime around August 18th, he crawled into his sleeping bag inside the bus for the last time.
But he took one last photo.
He did, a self-portrait, holding the SOS note maybe, and despite being terribly thin and emaciated. The sources say he's actually smiling slightly in the photo. Krakauer described the look as at peace, serene as a monk gone to God.
Okay, the outro,
Yeah.
the aftermath. The story doesn't end with his death, his family.
Right. 10 months later, his parents, Walt and Billy, the ones he'd vowed never to speak to again, they flew to the bus by helicopter.
That must have been incredibly difficult. What was that like, according to the sources?
It sounds profoundly emotional. Billy's first reaction, seeing the bus, was almost offensive. It's smaller than I thought it would be. But then she looked around at the landscape, the wilderness, and said, "What a pretty place. I can't believe how much this reminds me of where I grew up."
Finding a connection to him, even there.
Yeah, this awful realization that the kind of place he saw was maybe something she understood from her own past. The little details are just piercing.
Like the silverware.
Yeah, Billy found a spoon inside the bus with the exact same pattern as the set they used back home in Virginia, this tiny link to the life he ran from. And she picked up his old patched jeans, held them to her face, and said, "They still smell like Chris." Just devastating.
They left a memorial.
They did. A plaque, some emergency supplies for anyone else who might find themselves stranded there, and a first aid kit with a note inside.
What did the note say?
It urged whoever found it to call your parents as soon as possible, just trying to prevent another family from going through what they did.
The pain really underscores the cost of his choices.
Absolutely. There's that quote from a mountaineering guide the sources mention. Courage and strength are not without prudence, and that a momentary negligence may destroy the happiness of a lifetime. Fits perfectly here.
And his sister, Karen, she had a pretty clear take on people who admire him unconditionally.
She did. She basically said, look, if he had survived, maybe I'd agree with the admirers. But he didn't, she said, and there's no way to bring him back. The romantic ideal met a very harsh reality.
He went out seeking truth, quoting Thoreau, but ended up writing that happiness is only real when shared.
That's the final tragic irony, isn't it? He achieved the absolute solitude he thought he wanted, only to realize, maybe too late, that it wasn't the whole truth. That human connection, the thing he ran from, was essential.
So the question left for you, the listener, is about that cost. He chased absolute freedom, absolute truth, rejecting compromise. But what did that pursuit cost him? And maybe just as importantly, what did it cost the people who loved him, the ones he left behind? That final realization that unshared happiness isn't really happiness at all feels like the core lesson from Chris McCandless's journey into the wild.